好，各位家长还有各位同学，大家晚上好，欢迎参加3VEDU Amy 老师的公益直播课。拥有丰富经验写作培训经验的 Amy 老师呢，今晚将和大家分享多层次、不同角度如何提高写作，更重要的是让孩子爱上写作。1小时的直播呢，一定会让你收获满满。那我们接下来先来了解一下 Amy 老师。Amy 老师呢，曾在杜克大学学习过法律，那现在呢，在我们 3VEDU 任做老师。他是拥有非常经验丰富的SAT 写作老师以及文书申请的这个老师。Amy 具有丰富的标准化考试教学经验，他非常擅长帮助学生快速提升 SAT 阅读、语法和写作。他也帮助过学生平均总分都提高了100分以上。那接下来我们来看一看我们今天的这个讨论的一些话题是什么呢？第一个，我们就会讨论是什么才是所谓的好的写作。那么下面呢，会讨论一下为什么提高写作能力这么重要，那该如何提高写作能力，以及不同类型的论文和好写作的标准是什么，以及我们会如何帮助孩子爱上阅读与写作呢？那么接下来我们就有请 Amy 老师为我们来分享。
大家好，各位给我一下，就把这些东西给 unmute 一下。好，大家好，我是 Amy， 所以我先得说，我的英文是比我的中文强一下，所以I will ask everyone to bear with me today as I try to go through this in Chinese. Okay, so 要是有些时候我转去英文，那I hope that everyone can still understand. OK， 所以第一个 point 就是什么是好的写作？在英文有2个方面我们会说的，那就是 precision and concision。那我中文我翻译可能不是特别好，可是第一个就是说你得写的是非常清楚，你得写的，所以看的人马上一看就可以看懂。不是像有的时候你看小说，因为大部分我们就是写这个essay， 对不对？不是像有的时候你可以看那些古老的小说，就是我分析很多时间，我还是看不懂他说啥。那不是我们说的是 good writing。我们要是真的写一个好 essay， 第一点是非常的清楚 ，that's called precision。你想要说什么？你的 reader 一看一下就应该可以看清楚的，你不应该有 ambiguity 的，就是不清楚的地方。第二点我们就是叫英文是叫 concision，so concise。好多人对不起，我中文我可能翻译的不是特别好，那就是说你用的词越少，其实是越好的。我有的时候有很多学生，他们就写作就是总在那加词。就以为你越多的词就会是越好，其实你写作根本都不是这样的。你用越少的词把你的main point 给说出来，其实是更好的。所以就是这2点我们得要去考虑，就是怎么写的非常清楚，完了写的就是 concise，like don't use unnecessary terms or extraneous terms, right? It's only going to confuse your reader and bog down your writing, okay?所以那就是我们的第一点。第二点就是 why do we want to improve our writing？ 为什么你想要去写的更好？因为有些时候我有学生，他们是你要当 engineer 研究生，还是就是说当 software engineer computer scientist， 就想要学数学的，所以他们就跟我说，那将来我都是做这些数学这样的，我干嘛要去写好啊？那我就说，不管你做什么，你做医生也好，对不对？你做一个 engineer 也好，你还是得会写的，因为将来你是去 workplace， 对不对？你跟谁打关系，你都得 either 写 email， 你得需要这些 communication， 对不对？和要是你是想要在你这个 company 往上，就是像 how do you say it? In English we say it's like promotion, right?If you want to succeed in whatever line of work, you have to have good communication skills, right? That's both oral, 所以你得说得好，和你也得写得好 right? That's both oral and written. 要是你只可以，你这一方面你干不好的，那不管你做什么，你还是肯定会达到困难的将来的。 完了就是 I think it's a good skill to have, right? Basically, you want to be able to express yourself well. Okay. 所以对不起，我还是有的时候得说英文。Thank you guys for understanding. Okay. 那第三点就是 How do we improve our writing? 这差不多是大家都想要知道的，就是说，那我是觉得这写东西是很重要的，对不对？我是想要 improve， 可是我就不知道怎么 improve。那我就提一个叫 analogy， 一个 example。我从小我是学弹钢琴的，对不对？我觉得好多孩子现在都是在那儿学一个音乐的，对不对？那你学音乐是怎么improve， 怎么去提高的？那有两方面，一个是你每一个星期你去看一个老师，对不对？一个老师会给你提出来你哪儿地方有 weakness 有弱点，哪儿地方你得是 correct 的，哪儿地方你做错了，对，那是第一个，必须有一个老师去来教你的。可是第二点是啥？是每一天我得刻苦的在那儿练琴，对不对？你们有小孩子练音乐也是这样的，每一天都是至少1个小时在那儿练琴，还是不知道做 sports 的，还是也是每一天也是至少1个小时去练习，对不对？所以要是我们要 improve writing 跟别的 skill 都是一模一样的，不管你是弹琴，不管你是学数学，不管你是游泳，你当然每个做这个你需要一个人去帮你提倡，对不对？告诉你哪地方你得 correct， 可是你也得自己每一天每个星期的去练习。所以我们这个课就是我就是老师，我帮孩子们说你哪地方得 correct， 哪地方得去 improve。可是孩子们就只有自己的 responsibility， 就是像我弹琴一样的，每一天还得练习，他也是每一天也得练习的，因为是生命上没有这样的 miracle， 你知道，你就做一次就马上可以 improve 的，这些东西都是慢慢的来，每一天的就一点点的写，所以我就总跟我同学我学生说，至少你读书每一天至少要读15分钟到半个小时。写东西也是一样的，你真的想要 improve， 你应该每一天都是写15分钟到半个小时。你不用去写什么特深的，还是去写什么物理这些的，你就可以写你keep a diary， right？ 就说你今天干了什么，就是这样慢慢的来。完了，你跟一个老师就是写 essay 这样的 improve， 那就是可以这样的，这样你才 writing 才可以提高的。OK， 那我们往下就说，这是就是说，到底什么是 good writing， 对不对？我这第一个都已经说了，可是人家就想要知道什么是一个 good essay， 对不对？我们孩子们去上高中、上大学，总得是写 essay，right？所以你去考 SAT， 你去弄那 AP， 这些考试题里都是在那写 essay。那什么是 good essay 啊？其实这个问题不是那么简单的，因为不同的 essay 是有不同的 requirement。就像我们拿那个 SAT essay 当一个 example， 那 SAT 是想要一个非常 specific 的 essay 让你去写的，所以好的时候我发现学生是他写作可以是写得好，可是他不懂怎么写那个考试题邀请的那样的essay， 所以好的时候你就得不知道考试和上课你不知道 it's not enough to just know in general how to write well. You need to know the requirements of the class or the test and to tailor your writing that way. Right， 好多时候我们是考试题去上大学和高中，他们需要的 essay 就是叫 analytical writing。Analytical 就是你可以看一个 passage， 完了就说这个作家的 argument 是什么，他重点是什么，完不只是说他重点是什么，可是还得可以提出来他怎么 how did he make this argument, right? What are the sub-arguments? What are the devices he used? So as a student, they need to learn how to both identify those devices and then say how the devices are, the sub-arguments interrelate with each other and build up the main argument, okay? So this is one type of essay. Like there's other types of essay. For example, the AP literature exam will ask for an essay on literary analysis. And that requires a different skill where you're doing something like close reading. 你看一个小说，完了你必须挑出来这小说things like diction, sentence structure, theme, etc. And you need to be able to put that within an essay. So mainly my point here, apologies, I have to speak in English right now because there are some technical terms I don't know how to translate to Chinese. Mainly you need to know what the requirements of the class or the test, what they are. And you need to be able to master the skills required by each different essay type. Right, so I think it's kind of just being able to play it smart. There's no one size fits all sometimes for these tests. Is really knowing exactly what kind of essay they're looking for, fostering the correct skills for those essays. And then once you know what makes for a good essay, then you can write an essay that satisfies those standards, okay? So I only gave 2 different types of essays that we're going for number 4. But overall, there's more than 2 different types. Okay, number 5, 第5个，那我再换成中文吧。那什么，我们怎么让孩子爱上写作和读书？那你知道 I think 大部分孩子都是，要是你都是有兴趣的，对不对？他都是会爱看他有兴趣的东西。就像有些时候 you know, some kids will like science fiction, some like fantasy, some like something like historical. And so I think when I was young, my mother would just encourage, 就是我妈就是想就是 encourage 我去读书，就带我去图书馆，专门去看那些书是叫 classics 的。因为你知道，好的时候有些人写书也不是特好的，所以你想要孩子喜欢写作，喜欢那什么看东西，那你 I think you should just encourage their interests, right? I think you should bring them to places like libraries and encourage them to read. Okay. OK, 好的，所以 unfortunately 这个 slide 就是到这儿了。可是我就想要再说一下我们这些课是想要干嘛的。因为我们现在是有个 critical reading and writing 的 class， 是专门想要帮这些孩子去提高这些 reading 和 writing 的能力，对不对？所以大部分我就觉得你写东西，你读东西，你总是有一个我们叫 foundational skill 的，那孩子必须 master 的，就是不管你在看一个小说，还是看一个 scientific article， 还是看一个1860年人写的东西，你看东西，你这个 reading 总有这些 basic 东西，你懂的，就是说how do you OK 等一下，对不起，有个人给我说什么的，就是 how are you able to discern what the main argument is, right? And not only that, how do different parts of the passage support that main argument? 所以有一个人问说 Can you please share some cases? OK. 所以我有2种 student. 一种就是excuse me, 就比较跟 native speaker 一样，所以他英语是没有问题的，他只是好像我们就是看那些 passage 或那些 SAT passage 他比较有困难的，所以这些学生他们就是需要帮助去怎么 strategize 是the most efficient way to read a passage. OK, 我第2种学生就是不是 native speaker 的，所以就是这些学生就是可能英语那 foundation 是很 weak 的，好多东西他们都看不懂的，所以跟这些学生，第一个你就是最 basic 的先给他们教的，就是第一个你去 build 他们的 vocabulary， 完了就从更简单的 article 开始，再可以去挪到更难的。大部分学生我们发现就是跟他们一起上这些课，每一天给他们 assign 那些作业去做，我们总会是看 improvement 的。因为你是在这 reading 和 writing， 就是像跟我以前说的，跟别的 skill 都是一样的，对不对？总是得 practice and then you need some sort of oversight from a coach or teacher. So currently I know 这学校都是因为这个 coronavirus 都是被关了， 所以就是说这时候学生怎么可以就是 home study 这样的？那我就说，第一，你得选一个非常好的 source 去让你的孩子去读的，因为你不想要他去读这些乱七八糟的，根本都不会让他们成长的东西。所以我们就有一个 collection， 我可以 someone can share later on perhaps in the class， 就可以让他读 article， 像从 the New York Times，right？ 好多时候这些 online articles 从 good source，读的会很有帮助的。而且是 SAT， 很多时候会把他们的 essay prompt 就是从那个 New York Times opinion piece 给拿出来的。所以第一，我应该说是第二，你怎么想要 improve 你的 writing？ 一个 another important thing 是 in order to improve your writing, you should read good writing, right? Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So what I mean by that is you want to be able to pick out good authors and good writers and imitate the way they write. So some, for essay writing, nonfiction, you can go read articles in The Guardian or the New York Times and some of the more, I think, upper level journals and imitate the way they write, read that. That will improve both reading and writing. And I think this course that we're offering for critical reading and writing is meant specifically to, improve children's skills in this area, specifically during, this very unique time we're going through, since a lot of the schools are closed and not all of them have online courses. OK， 那我等一下看一下人跟我说了啥。那现在我们看一下，想不想打开去 Q&A？ 人家有什么问题可以问的？OK， 所以我有一个问题在这，就是OK， 好的，我先就说 What's the difference between the SAT and ACT? Do you recommend the SAT or ACT? 所以好的，对不起，我先看一下，因为有好多人。OK， 好的。OK， 那我就先。Okay, so I'm going to switch to English because when I'm talking about the SAT and ACT, unfortunately, it's best for you not to hear me try to talk through that in Chinese. So I think one of the differences is, at least for writing, the writing test is not significantly different for both. So by that, I mean the multiple choice section, because they both test on grammar. They both test on basic reading comprehension. Where they differ significantly is the essay, right? The SAT essay is what we call a rhetorical analysis essay. It asks you to, analyze an essay for its rhetorical devices, show how those devices bolster or support an author's argument, and then show how it persuades a reader. So every single essay we go for the SAT has 3 different, I think you would call them, levels of proof. Whereas the ACT essay is what we call the 3 perspectives essay. So in the ACT essay, they will give you 3 different perspectives, ask you to synthesize your own perspective, and then I think they say, it's called effectively analyze it in relation to those 3 different perspectives. So for the SAT essay, you're actually given a passage that you annotate and analyze. For the ACT essay, you're only given 3 different perspectives and an overarching theme. For instance, maybe public health and individual freedom. So I would say the SAT essay is more rhetorical analysis, and the ACT essay is more what I would call argumentative, expository. the skill set is about similar to both, but as I mentioned before, in order to succeed on either test, it's a matter of knowing what each test asks for. So the essay portion is widely different. The English portion, i.e. SAT writing and ACT English, is not too different. I think whether or not a student should take the SAT or ACT is really a matter of individual strengths. I think I can't give a blanket answer right now. Another question is, what books are good for teens to read at home now? Well, for me, I'm not sure. For one thing, I would encourage teens to select books that they have interest in. But otherwise, I think every year the school, and I really just recommend them reading the classics, right? So things like Alexander Dumas, The Three Musketeers, because these are timeless books. They have good material, and I think they're challenging enough that when you read them, it will improve reading otherwise. Other than that, I would say, read articles, so nonfiction. It's always great to read biographies by famous figures, and otherwise, like I said, you can go look at the New York Times, The Guardian, other online resources such as this. What classic literature do you recommend for middle schoolers? I don't think there's an age limit to classic literature. I would be kind of hesitant about some of the content. So that's the only thing I would say would bar middle schoolers from reading classic literature. Some of them may contain mature content that I don't think you might think is inappropriate for a child in middle school. Otherwise, you can read things like, The Secret Garden. There's a lot of books such as those that I think even, I don't think I would recommend Shakespeare or something like that. But I think every library has their classics section. And that's just really, I would just recommend having your child explore that section and select books from there. Okay. Can you tell? Okay, so I think some students want to know how to improve essay writing in a short amount of time. Oh, well, actually, I'm sorry. There's been a Q&A question here that I haven't looked. How do you find the best evidence to support your main point in an essay? Okay, that's a very good question. But I think it also depends on the type of essay you're talking about, right? So if you're doing something like a literary analysis essay, then your best evidence will always be quotes from the fictional passage or book that you're analyzing. I always say the best evidence is the one that most directly and effectively proves your point. So don't choose something that's only inferential or something that's talking about something that's irrelevant to the point you're trying to make. Really, the best evidence is the one that's most direct, right? If you want to prove that the author thinks that privacy considerations actually, actually heighten something like individual freedom, then within the essay you're looking at, you want to find the lines where the author directly states that. When I see students choose weak evidence, usually they either chose something that's completely irrelevant, so about something else entirely, or they misinterpreted something into something it wasn't. So mainly you just want to be accurate and you want to choose the evidence that most directly supports your main argument. Why I don't recommend Shakespeare? Oh, I just think, I don't, it's not that I don't recommend Shakespeare. I just think the type of, I think like drama is something that's a very unique form. It's very much focused on, the language, and also it's very antiquated old language and structure. Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with reading Shakespeare. I just think that in order to improve your reading of, nonfiction passages and more contemporary passages, it's probably better to focus on other things. Otherwise, it's fine to read Shakespeare. I just think at least at a middle school level, it's probably very difficult to understand. So it's really not worth too much of the time put into it at middle school, at least. Okay, I think there was another question. Okay, for a sixth grader, do you recommend the writing class or the reading and writing class since you offer two types? Okay, I mean, I would offer both. I believe it comes as a package, right? So I think they're called critical reading and writing courses. The reason why I recommend both is that reading and writing as skills are very, I think, closely intertwined. The better you are at reading, I think the more likely you are to improve your skills as a writer, and vice versa. Because in order to be a good writer, especially when you're writing something like an analytical essay, you need to be able to read very well. So that's why I would recommend taking both classes. They really should be taken in tandem with each other, because the skill sets for both really complement each other. Okay, let's see if there are any other ones. So if there are any other questions on the class or reading and writing in general, do let me know. Okay, it says, my high school sophomore kid has such a hard time with understanding classic books such as Jane Eyre. How do I help him? Oh, it's wonderful that he's reading Jane Eyre. It's a very good book. Well, I think for one thing, you have to figure out why he doesn't understand the book. Is it a vocabulary issue? Is it that he understands what he's saying, but he doesn't understand, the message/theme of the book? And I think for that, one, you have to figure out what the problem is, right? You can't help a student when you don't know why you struggle. So I would ask your child, what part of it does he find hard to understand? If it's just reading comprehension, then for passage lists like Jane Eyre, or, because Jane Eyre was written, I think, in the Romantic period. So some of the language is older. I would say, since it has complicated sentences, to really try breaking it down into simpler sentences. When you read a sentence, have your son ask himself, who is this sentence referring to? What is this sentence referring to? And sometimes just figuring out who the sentence is referring to actually helps a lot. If his issue of understanding isn't, reading comprehension, but it's more, I don't understand the point of that, then I think that's a different story. Then that's more just teaching your child how to read for, I think, overarching themes or something like that. Okay, I hope that helped answer your question. I also don't think there's anything wrong with reading more popular literature from time to time. I think there's some very good, popular teen level books that are also very well written that can help improve reading as well. I think part of improving reading is, yes, you want to read high quality books, but also you just want to read in general. That's the best way to improve. It is more sentence structure and words. Okay, yes, then it's really just, I think he should just slow down when he reads, and then it might help if he tries rewriting things into their more modern form and simpler sentences, because different children, they learn different ways. Some students, I find it really helps if you ask them to summarize it. Okay. What do I find the most difficult about teaching students? I don't find teaching very difficult. I find it, a very rewarding experience. I will say the most difficult part is when your students aren't very, not proactive, but when they don't participate. So the most difficult kids are the quiet kids. Like, I love the kids who will talk to me, right? Because then I can figure out how to help them. Whereas if a child is very quiet, and they don't communicate, it's harder for me to understand where their weaknesses and struggles are. So I think that's the only difficult part. Then it's just a matter of, trying to build rapport with the child so they're more willing to share with you. Okay. what can I do at home to help my child succeed in reading? One thing, I think we have a series of courses that will help your child succeed in reading. And another thing is just, I think it might help if you build a, what is it called? Not a reading schedule, but a reading list with your child, right? So select a few books that you can read together with your child, and so you can discuss with him or her after they finish reading it. I think that's really, participating as a family within that activity is one of the best ways to help the child succeed, right? Because oftentimes I think children, they just need some more support, especially from parental figures. So probably, build a reading list. You can look through, your local library. I think librarians are also a good resource. You can ask them what you're looking for. Although right now with these days, I think we're more left with online resources. Okay, any further questions? I mean, I think for writing in particular, the most important thing is knowing how to, especially for essays, is knowing how to write a good thesis. So that's just, I would say, the central argument of your paper. Okay. What can I do about my kid right now in lockdown? He's only playing video games. How do I suggest him to practice some reading and writing? Well, I think for one thing, you can block his access to video games. I don't say that. I think it's mainly just setting time limits to it. I don't really play any consoles myself. I'm pretty sure all of them have parental controls so that you can limit the amount of time that he spends on it. And then another thing is that for reading and writing, you can maybe try to find material that would interest him. So I don't know, whatever, maybe he likes a particular story in video games, and you can try to find the same story in reading that would probably pique his interest. But really, when it comes to, I think, the games thing, you should really try to, I don't say that, they could never play video games, but it's probably best to limit the amount of time they have on it. So to have like set time limits so that they're not just spending, 6 hours on it every single day. You can make sure they only access their device for some very limited amount of time each day. Okay, any further questions? Okay, please do ask questions. And I think another thing is that you can look through this, because I think all high schools have a list of books, since each district has a list of books that they give high school teachers that they can select from in order to teach high schoolers. So I think one thing you can do is I think all those lists are accessible. So you can go look at those lists and see what your districts suggest for their level and try to choose books from that. I think mainly, to go back to writing, since that was what I was saying, is that one thing that we instruct them is that you want to be able to build an argument, because a lot of students these days, they can write in general, like you can do a narrative or a description, but a lot of them have issues writing argumentative essays. Do you have class for 5th graders? I believe we do. Yes, because we are using a specialized, I believe, reading material software that targets all grade levels. So we actually have a separate course for 5th to 6th graders. That's what we call, I believe, the level 2 courses. That's completely separate from the 7th to 9th graders. So I think one of the difference is that, grade level wise, reading is almost always fundamentally similar, right? You build the same skills. It's just that your reading material is simpler when you're at grade 5 than you are at grade 9. And as the material increases in complexity, then you may need to pick up a few more interpretive skills. But the foundational skills for most of these are the same. It's just the material changes and becomes more challenging. But yes, we do have a class that's for 5th graders. Or am I teaching the twice a week? Yes, I am teaching that. For G5 to 7, yes, I am teaching that course. And then I think we have, I'm not sure if this has been shared, but I think we also have another course for 3rd and 5th grade, to 4th, 5th graders that's being taught by another teacher. But I am teaching the 5 to 7 course and the 7 to 9 course. So that's critical reading and writing. And we make sure that the material is targeted and appropriate for the different grade levels. So a 9th grader won't be reading the same material as a 6th grader. But at the same time, we want to instruct both groups in how to improve in their skills for each level. Do I have class for 10th grader? I think by 10th grade, we recommend they start signing up for SAT courses. So it really depends on the reading level of the 10th grader. If they are at the 9th grade level, then it may be appropriate. But usually by 10th grade, I would recommend that he or she take a diagnostic SAT and perhaps try to enroll in one of the SAT courses. If it's just your 10th grader wants to improve reading and writing in general, then I do think the G7 to 9 course may be appropriate for him or her. We just have to see based on a diagnostic test and based on your 10th grader's reading level. Okay. What are common reading difficulties you see in younger kids, in older kids? Okay, let me think about this for a bit. For younger children, I don't think it's really so much. I really think for, reading difficulty, I really divide it more towards my native speakers and my ESL speakers. So my ESL speakers, a lot of times have trouble with comprehension. And that's just because a lot of them came here when they were older. And so their vocabulary is not the best. So oftentimes, I think the struggle is just getting them to be able to comprehend a passage. So if it's like a complex sentence, and sometimes it's because their vocabulary is not the best. I think the best strategy for them is just, one, memorizing vocabulary words, and then secondly, being able to read from context and trying to make an educated guess about what the meaning of a paragraph is, even if you don't understand certain words. For my native speaker, the most common difficulty I see is actually what I would call, over speculating a passage. So I see this a lot on the SAT courses. They're all very smart kids, right? But sometimes they're too smart for their own good. So I had a student when we were reading a passage on sovereignty, and the passage was saying that sovereignty was not good, right? That sovereignty could be abused against human rights because the passage was very interested in human rights laws. Well, this student has studied sovereignty on his own time, and so he kept insisting that sovereignty was good, that it had positive benefits, and he read that into the passage. So a common reading difficulty I see among my older, very smart students is that they like to input outside knowledge into the passage. Sometimes they like to jump to conclusions when they read a passage because it's just like some of it might even sound reasonable or some of them might sound ridiculous. But for tests that test reading comprehension and even reading comprehension in general, it's not testing your outside knowledge, right? It's not about what you know about the subject. It's about your ability to accurately assess and discern what the author said about the subject. So my common difficulty in my native speakers is trying to get them to stop, speculating wildly, jumping to conclusions, or, just inputting outside information into passages. I want them to be able to stick to what the author says. That's really a common flaw I see in them. And then ESL, I think it's mainly just teaching them to read for context. right? If you don't understand a vocabulary term, it's okay. Usually from context, you should be able to still grasp what the main idea of the passage is. Okay, any further questions? Do I focus on strengths or weaknesses in my classes? Yes, we do. So we are trying to use the specialized software that we assign homework from it to the, so all homework is assigned based off the softwares. As of now, I think there might be some alterations. And the software is able to analyze what the children's strengths and weaknesses are. Like, are they not good at making inferences? Are they not good at getting the main idea from the passage? And based on the input from that, from the detailed reports, we want to focus on what the children are struggling with, right? We have a syllabus for the class, and I want to follow the syllabus mostly, but I don't want to be so inflexible that when it's clear that people are struggling with a specific concept, that we don't target it, right? Because that's the point of having a human teacher, right? That you can see what your students are struggling with, and you should be able to pinpoint it and work on it. If your entire class understands how to read for the main idea, there's no reason to spend 2 weeks on the main idea, right? I think that's just basic intelligence. And if your entire class is struggling with doing inference questions, then you should probably spend more time on that. So we definitely try to tailor these classes based on what the students are actually struggling with. Any further questions? How do I measure your kids' progress in reading/writing class? I believe it's through, we assign them homework, and then based the homework, they will get results, how many they get correct, how many they get wrong. I think they also take a diagnostic test before they enter the class. I'm not clear about whether there will be an exit test, but be assured that through the homework, we are carefully looking and curating at what they're missing, and there should be improvement based on how they do on the homework activity. For writing, we have people grading essays and offering input. And then I think for one of the classes, we're going over revisions on the essays. So hopefully, children should be writing better essays by the end of the course than in the beginning. I believe they'll be writing, I think, 3 essays for G5 to 7, and then 4 for G7 to 9. And then all the essays will be graded with, comments on how to improve on it. So for each reading and writing, we do want to measure the progress in order to see if there is improvement. Okay, any further questions?
Okay, I think thank you again for Amy's sharing today, and I hope everyone can enjoy today's open class. 好，那我们接下来在3月22号的时候会有接下来的公益直播，标题是标化考试如何花最少的时间拿最好成绩。另外，值得提出的是 ，Amy 老师今天呢更加注重的是 essay 的基础提高。后面讲座中呢，君老师会着重的是 essay 考试技巧，如何做一些小调整，就能让你的 essay 拿高分。所以希望大家可以持续的关注到我们的公益直播课当中。另外呢，我们最近也是因为一些最近也会有一些公益的半价课，包括有 Darius 老师的这个 reading 课，但我们现在这个 Level 2跟 Level 3已经满员了，所以还剩下 Level 1的课，是半价课。如果有需要的同学可以来就是来了解一下。另外的话，还有一个批判性阅读与写作课，是 Critical Reading and Writing 一起的一节课，那是由我们的 Sarah 安老师和 Amy 老师一起来带的课，也是公益半价课，是现在的价格呢是不好意思，这个海报好像是错了，课程时长是10周，然后现在的公益价呢是650美金，不是840美金。如果有感兴趣的同学或者家长的话，也可以在群里面@班主任，任何一个班主任进行一下咨询都是可以的。好，那再次感谢所有的家长和同学参与到我们的这个公益直播课当中，我们下一期再见吧。 Darius 老师的课能详细介绍一下吗？可以的，就是Darius 老师的课的话是分为 Level 1、Level 2和 Level 3。那 Level 1的话是怎么说，就是面向给1年级到这个2年级3年级到5年级的，然后 Level 2是5年级到7年级。Level 3呢是7年级到9年级，主要是3周的课，一共是6节课，是想让大家呢，是适合不同的年龄段，然后来让他去感受一下，就是提高一下他的阅读，并且让他爱上阅读这件事情。我觉得详细一点的资料的话，我可以微信发给您，你可以在微信群里面@我，我是班主任飞。